I am once again recording through back spasms, kids. And so there will be questions about my endurance for this episode, but I got Dr. Ho working on my back, and we're going to soldier on because we got some fun stuff this week, okay? Last week, I did my reflections upon the past 10 years in the music scene for me. This week, we're following that up with a really fun Q&A session about those 10 years in a presentation that includes the harrowing tale of a dark night in Germany. And we'll get to it on the other side. Hello, you're listening to the John Huff Podcast. Oh, yay. Thing is, I didn't even earn these particular back spasms. Like, nothing happened. I just sat down one morning last week and then, I don't know, shifted a millimeter and whoosh. It just whoosh. That's how it goes sometimes. Sometimes it's an electric shock in your back, and I'm like, uh-oh, I know what that means. Other times, it's like just a whoosh, and all of a sudden, here we go again. And it really freaking sucks, okay? But I'm not here to talk about back spasms. I'm just here to let you know that if I suddenly yelp, or if I just disappear, that's why, all right? That's what's going on. But I put out the call for questions related to my past 10 years playing music and being in the music world. And as ever, you listeners of the John Huff Podcast responded, gave me some great stuff, and I'm going to tell some fun stories, and we're just going to have a good time, all right? Last week was a little bit heavy, some life lessons, some Buddhism, some Taoism expressed through the presentation. This week, we're just going to have fun, all right? So the first question I'm going to tackle comes to us from the great Leanne Mayer herself, accomplished singer-songwriter with whom I have played before on shows, and I did a bio for her at one point. Leanne's great, very, very, very cool person and a great songwriter, and she writes to me to say, what was your favorite gig? In the past 10 years, what was your favorite gig? And there have been so freaking many. Like literally just hundreds of gigs. And I'm so excited to be able to say that. You know, we talked about the 10-year anniversary last week of when I first stepped on stage with Hearts after being out of the scene for so long. And now to look back on that 10 years later and think, wow, I was so frightened that night. And 10 years later, I've played so many freaking gigs. And that is a real kind of badge of honor for me. But what were the favorites? What were the favorites? There have been so many great ones. The ones that I lean towards tend to fall into one of two categories, and sometimes those categories overlap, okay? I go for gigs that were just big gigs for big audiences, and I go for milestone gigs. And sometimes that's the same thing. I mean, I can't look past opening with Hearts at London Music Hall for Nazareth and opening for Headstones at the same venue. And we opened for Finger 11 on a New Year's Eve. It was like a big crowd. I really value playing for an audience. And if you are an indie artist or in an indie band, you know what I'm talking about. Because a lot of the time you're playing your local watering hole for 15 friends and family, or a couple of strangers, or just an empty room. I mean, that happens all the freaking time, and you grind away. How many times have I driven 2-3 hours out of town to play in T-Dot, to play in Windsor, whatever, to an empty room? A sea of empty seats, as Sarah Harmer would say. And it's a drag, and it's just part of the game. It's how it is, you know? And then you get a chance to go out as Hiroshima Hearts, a rock band, to play a big rock room in front of 800 or 1,000 rock fans. And it's like you get the experience. It's like, oh yeah, this is the part that we really wanted, to experience in our lives. And to be able to walk out on stage in that energy, and the people are actually standing up front. It's not a semicircle of 15 people 30 feet back from the stage. And you see bands all the time, at this sort of indie level, admonishing the people to come forward. We won't bite. Hard. Come forward. Be part of the show. And then they stand. I don't know why people stand back. It's weird being the only person standing in front of the stage, though. That's kind of conspicuous. Kind of weird. But, indie bands are always like, come on, everybody take a step forward. Come on forward. Like, pretend you want to be here with us, be part of the moment. But then you walk out on a big stage, opening for a big band with a real following, and there's 800 or 1,000 or 1,200 people there. And they're right up front, and you're in that energy, and you're playing loud, and you're playing your music, and people are responding. What a freaking rush that is. What a freaking fabulous feeling that is. So when I look at my favorite shows that I've played, a lot of times it's those ones. Music Hall with Hearts, or in slightly different vein, but playing with Carly Thomas at the Home County Folk Festival in front of, I don't know, there might have been 2,000 people. It was like a beautiful Friday night, and we were early on like 7 o'clock, and I forget who was headlining. It might have been Jim Cuddy or somebody. And, it's the same thing, just walking out and playing in front of a real audience of people listening to the music or participating in the music. Leanne will know as well as I do. You play shows so often where nobody's there or nobody cares. And that's not a knock on Leanne or me or anybody else. It's just the reality of music at the indie level. So getting a chance to play real rooms in front of real audiences is just a huge rush. So I did that with Carly. I did that with Hearts a few times. Done it with Sarah. It's just cool. And those are my favorite gigs, man. Those are the ones that really stick with me. But then there's also the milestone gigs, all right? And those are the ones where I look at it like we did this. I think of Hiroshima Hearts when we released, I don't remember if it was Bone Music or it was the self-titled record, but we did a release show at a big club in L-Town, and we headlined it, and a lot of people came, and it was like, we did this. We built our little band from literally nothing, 3 guys in a basement, up to this point where we're headlining this room, and people have come to hear us, and they knew who we are, and it's like, we did this. And I always get this little kind of shiver of satisfaction from the knowledge that we just took the steps and we did the grind and we did the work, and then we produced these results. And I think of when Hearts released vinyl. We did a vinyl 7-inch, the Reach Out single, and we released that with a big show at Aeolian Hall in London, and that was a real topper for me. The Aeolian Hall is just a beautiful, venerable old theater, and they don't usually have rock bands in there. We had a connection at the time, and I think we set the decibel level record for the venue. Not used to having hard rock bands in there playing Led Zeppelin with Howie Zowie playing theremin with us. You know what I mean? But it's like, I had always wanted to play Aeolian. I had never had the chance. It's a great, great room, And I thought I would, eventually get in there with a singer-songwriter because that tends to be the vibe of that venue. But it turned out to be my band. It turned out to be Hearts. And we released our 7-inch there, and we nearly filled it. It was very close to sold out. And again, it was just another one of those things like, we did this. We built this band from nothing to being able to headline this room and have this audience come. And it just stands out to me as an accomplishment. I like gigs that are big crowds, and I like gigs that are accomplishments. And then sometimes there's just gigs that are so fun and so cool that they just stand out to you. I think, again, of the Sarah Band playing in Winterswijk, Netherlands, for that crazy Dutch crowd in a beer tent. And we were getting near the end of a tour, and we were freaking exhausted. There's the famous photo of me sitting down on a stool side stage, warming up, because we were headlining that night, warming up to go on stage, and I literally fell asleep sitting on the stool. And there's a photo of me doing that. It's like we were so tired, but then we went up, and it was loud, and it was loose, and the crowd was wasted, and they were into it. We were into it, and it was just a great night. You know, it was a triumph of how fun it can be to play live, because it isn't always that fun. Most times it is, but a lot of times you're just concentrating, you're trying to keep it together, you're trying to hear, there's a monitor issue, there's stuff that pulls away, distracts you from the show, but then once in a while you just catch a vibe, right? Once in a while you just catch a momentum. And that night in Winterswijk, Netherlands, in the town square, was that. Loud, loose, we were just in it. We didn't feel any pressure. I didn't. And we just let it go, man. Like 5 or 6 weeks of pent up tour stuff. Not that it was acrimonious, not that there were any issues. It was just you accumulate pressure, you accumulate stress, miles, fatigue, shows, right? It's a demanding thing to be on the road, especially when, like the Sarah Band, you pretty much play every day, and it just accumulates, and then you get a moment to release it. And that was that show in Winterswijk, and it stands out to me as one of the best and most fun shows I've ever played. Because we were loose. Not despite the fact, but because we were so loose and we played. And that one just really and then it turns out, I discover later, that I'm basically playing where my people come from. That's an added wrinkle. That adds just another sort of tinge of nostalgia to that gig. My people come, what became the Huff side of my family, the Brinkerhoffs, from that part of the Netherlands. It was like a homecoming. It's like the spirits were there, kids, singing along with us. So those are some of my favorites, Leanne. Big crowds, milestone gigs, and then just a weird, loose night in the tiny, picturesque town of Winterswijk, Netherlands. Now, speaking of the lovely and talented Carly Thomas, I got several really interesting questions from Carly related to this, and I'm going to dig into them now because I don't know how long my back is going to hold up, and I want to talk about some of this stuff. So she threw me a really fun one. You know, I've talked about having played so many shows, and over the course of the last 10 years, I've been able to play some amazing venues in some cool places. Everything from Carly and I played a market stall, like a stall at an outdoor market in Banff. And I'm sitting there at the drums looking up at a mountain, and people are just sort of walking by. They're getting tomatoes next door, you know, and then stop and listen to us play for like weird stuff like that, all the way up to, you know, playing big folk festivals and kind of everything in between. You know, I've played some weird ones, but Carly says to me, what are your 5 dream venues that you want to play? And that is a fun conversation. So I'm going to give them to you, I think in no particular order, but 5 venues, 5 dream venues that I would like to play before this ride is over. One is Red Rocks. Gwendolyn is smiling. Red Rocks, Denver, Colorado. You've seen photos of Red Rocks, right? Like this amphitheater that's carved out of red rocks, like huge rocks out in the middle of nowhere, I guess. And it's just so beautiful to look at. And iconic stuff has happened there, like the U2 live show that was recorded there back in the early 80s, like cool stuff. It's a world-renowned, famous venue, Red Rocks, the outdoor amphitheater. I want to play there. Carly, I am holding you to our agreement that if you ever get booked there, I am playing that show with you. I would like to play Wembley Stadium. I would like to play, why not dream big, kids? I would like to play Wembley Stadium. I would like to play the Sydney Opera House. I'm not even sure why, but I mean, the Sydney Opera House is iconic as well. I would love to play there. Keep Carnegie Hall. I mean, I would accept a gig at Carnegie. I want to play the Sydney Opera House because I saw a picture of probably my favorite drummer, Jason Tate, one of them anyways, and he was on tour with Bahamas, and they were down in Australia, and they played the Opera House, and there's like photos from the stage of Jason's kit, and it's like his POV looking out at the opera. I'm like, dude, I want that. I want that. Red Rocks, Wembley, Sydney Opera House. Last weekend, not this past, but the one before, the War on Drugs was on Austin City Limits, and they were so good. Go to pbs.org, look up the Austin City Limits page on that website, and you will find the full show. All right, the War on Drugs, Austin City Limits, absolutely freaking fabulous. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'd like to play Austin City Limits. So let's get Austin City Limits on my list of dream venues. And the last one, and a lot of you are going to smile, want to play the Whiskey Kids. Want to play the Whiskey A Go-Go, Hollywood, California. All right, I have stood outside the Whiskey. The Whiskey is kind of the birthplace, certainly one of the vital, iconic locations, along with maybe the Key Club, etc., of the California Sunset Strip glam scene, right? That's where the roots are. The Whiskey, man. Motley Crue, down at the Whiskey. Guns N' Roses. They all played the Whiskey, man. That whole scene was centered around the Whiskey A Go-Go, and I want to play the Whiskey. So that's my list. Red Rocks, Wembley Stadium, Sydney Opera House, Austin City Limits, and the Whiskey A Go-Go. Let's do that, all right? Now, Carly asked me another interesting question. She said, what's the weirdest behind-the-scenes story that you've got? And a couple of things. It's curious and kind of ironic timing that she would ask me that, because I played with Carly last weekend. Saturday night, back spasms at all. I have my spouse or significant other basically carrying my gear for me, putting my shoes on for me, and then I sort of angle myself onto the drum throne and try to get through 2 sets of music, which we did reasonably successfully, and that's not easy to do, man. Back spasms. I have 2 enduring tour nightmare scenarios. One is debilitating back spasms that put me on the floor of the hotel and do not let me get back up. Second is horrendous gallbladder attack. Now, number 2 has happened more than once. I've talked about that, and it ain't fun, Jack. But you can do it, all right? You can survive and play. Debilitating back spasms take the drummer out of the picture and make him a liability. Great fear, all right? With 80% back spasms, your spouse or significant other can put your shoes on you and you can play the show, all right? Then you go home and you lie down. 100% back spasms, ain't no show, ain't no shoes. It's a bad scene, man. So I fear that, and I try not to think about it. But Carly and I and the Carly Band were playing a local venue, and we were there at 6:30 to set up for an 8 o'clock gig. And when we walked through the door, isn't the whole stage covered with people doing trivia and having some sort of hot sauce drinking competition? So right off the bat, that qualifies as a weird behind-the-scenes thing. We're here to play the show, but there's a hot sauce competition happening. Made me think of when the 3, that's Ken the Zen and me and a rotating cast of third members, cover band we play in once in a while. We got booked a few years ago to play a campground. Always a fun time. And so off we go. We trundles off to the campground, gonna entertain the people. And when we arrive, they're like, it's bingo night, guys. What do you mean it's bingo night? We're booked to play here. I don't know. Guess there's a double booking because it's bingo night. And if there's one thing I know about campgrounds, kids, nothing preempts bingo night. So what they wound up doing was we'll play a round of bingo, and then while we're doing the changeover for the next round of bingo, you guys come up and play. Okay. And so you get bingo! And then we run up on stage. My best friend's girlfriend. I for Isaiah, number 7. And it just went on for I don't know how many rounds of this we did, but they gave us pizza. And that's one of the keys to a band's heart. All right. So that was a weird one. There have been so freaking many. I have seen some weird ass stuff over the past 10 years, all right? And I can't talk about some of it publicly. That will be the John Huff Podcast After Dark, and I'll have to have people on it. I'll have to disguise their voices. But I'm going to tell you a story right now, kids, which is probably, it's right up there amongst the weirdest stuff that's happened off stage in my little career. And when Carly's talking about behind the scenes, I'm taking that to mean not on stage, all right? This is stuff surrounding the stage experience. So hot sauce competition, bingo night, but not stuff that happens on stage. This is off stage, out of the public eye, all right? And so I present to you now
Howl and the Murder Walk.
Schwelm, Deutschland, September 2021. Sarah Band is booked to play one of those rooms you play sometimes. Subterranean. Shaped like a submarine or the fuselage of a Boeing 737. I don't remember much about it. Low ceilings. Recessed lights. Wine glasses. Acrobats. Chimpanzees on tricycles. You know what I'm talking about. It was a rough night. One of those nights where something comes along and knocks you off balance. And after that, it's like your belt buckle on Taco Tuesday. Hard to keep it together. But we played the show. We took our bows, and then Kay, Howl, and I retired to quarters, which were on the premises. Now, at a certain point, Kay and I looked at each other, and we said, in that perfect harmony that we do, Ich habe Hunger. Deep hunger. The kind of hunger that makes you say, I could eat at McDonald's. So we checked our maps, and as luck or destiny would have it, there was a McDonald's within walking distance. Problem was that it would be closing within half an hour, which is just about how long it would take us to walk there. We had time, but it was going to be like King's X on the third night of a tour. Tight AF. That's road life for you sometimes, kids. It's like playing Russian roulette or using a porta potty at a festival. You close your eyes and you take your chances. And so it happened that Kay, Howl, and I struck off into the German night, searching for the golden arches, like the Magi for the Christ child. No more voice stories. Take too freaking long. So Kay and I go walking, right? We're going looking for this McDonald's, which is, I don't know, like 700 or 800 meters away. It's not far. So we walked a few blocks looking for a right turn that would take us to Mickey D's. But as we walked, no such turn appeared. So we kept going, and soon we were no longer walking on the sidewalk at all, kids. We were walking along the edge of a German highway that was lit only by the moon. And the headlines were coming to me. Canadian musicians disappear in Germany. I thought we were going to get run over by a European cycling team, or perhaps pulled into the cornfield beside us and never heard from again. We had gone way past where the turn was supposed to be. No turn. And we thought, something ain't right here, man, and we're running out of time. So we decide to turn around and go back. And we walk a little while. We come back to the sidewalk, and then there's like a little lane, which is now to the left. Looking for a right turn, this is now to the left. There's a little tiny lane behind some houses. And we're like, is that it? I don't know. Let's try that. So we go down the lane, and It goes for like, I don't know, a block. And then it stops at the edge of a dark forest. And there's a little tiny dirt trail beckoning us forward. And I'm thinking Hansel and Gretel here, you know what I mean? It's like, all right, we've come this far. I guess we'll just follow this and see what happens. And so it's black, man. It is nighttime. We don't know where we are. We're on the edge of civilization. We were supposed to be at McDonald's 10 minutes ago. And we go walking down this dirt path through a freaking forest. Now, at that time of my life, the anxiety was pretty heavy, man. And one of the things that fuels anxiety is your ability to project in your mind. I got a pretty good imagination for this kind of thing, you know? So I'm imagining we're not coming out of this forest, man. It is not lit in there. We got like our phones out, lighting the way through a freaking forest. We're supposed to be in a city. And we're walking, and there's puddles, and it's like, dude, should we go back? Because something ain't right. But then in the distance, I don't know if we could hear traffic maybe? We could see maybe lights in the distance. We push forward, and then suddenly we emerge from this forest, and it was freaking creepy in there. Kay will tell you that. I'm waiting for animals or bears or axe murderers to jump out at us. It was freaking crazy. And we emerge from this forest, and all of a sudden there's like, there's a road and buildings. And then we walk a few paces and look to the left, and there's the Golden Arches way up on the hill, but we're running out of time. We got like 5 minutes, and so we suddenly start sprinting. We're sprinting, and we're laughing, and we're just running. It's like that scene in National Lampoon's Vacation. You know, Chariots of Fire is playing, and Clark W. Griswold is running to the front door of Wally World. Nobody else in the parking lot. Seems a little strange. That's Kay and me running up this hill to get to the Golden Arches, and we're run, and we're panting, and we're laughing. And then, I don't know, it's like 2 minutes to midnight, Iron Maiden. And we open the door and we go and we kind of collapse into McDonald's, you know, doing the pant. And the guy's just looking at us. And I don't know. It's like they're packing up, man. They're closing in a couple minutes. And we're like, can you serve us? And the guy's like, yeah, okay. God bless that man. God bless the Germans. And so we ordered some veggie burgers, and they're getting ready to pitch the fries. So they just load us up. All the fries they got less. Like, we'll take them. Dude, we're musicians on tour. We'll take all the freaking fries you got. And then, so we get our food. Fabulous. Thank you so much. Off we go. And then we're like, we got to go back through the murder forest. It's like if they didn't get us going through, they're probably waiting on us coming back. You know, they heard us speaking English. They know they got a couple of stewed prunes coming in. They're going to get us, man. And so we clutched the McDonald's bags to our chests, and we pick up sticks. And we didn't pick up sticks. And we kind of make our way back through the murder forest, and then back down the little lane, and then back to the road, hang a left, and hightail it back to the hotel as fast as we can go. And we get back to our hotel room, which is a really lovely room, and we get out the food to eat, and doesn't a big splotch of my veggie burger, like the lettuce and stuff, just fall out and splotch all over the bed. Dang freaking foreigners are like Led Zeppelin, man. Just trashing that hotel room. And that's a bizarre, behind the scenes, weird story. The murder walk through the forest, and it was freaking scary. I was like, what are we doing out here? Literally walking down the edge of a highway, and it's pitch black, man. And it's like, that's the sort of thing that happens, man. It is Russian roulette. So there you go, Carly. That's maybe the most bizarre or weird offstage story I've got. But the veggie burger was good, and the fries were yummy. And now seems like an ideal time for the Patreon plug. Yes! There is a Patreon page for this program. It is patreon.com/John Huff Podcast. As you might expect, I do not want to do ad reads on this program, okay? I have opted to monetize via Patreon because Patreon is voluntary. All right? You are not forced to listen to ads or ad reads from me. If you want to support the show financially, Patreon is a wonderful way to do it. I offer one tier of membership. It is $5 a month. You may think of it as tipping me $1.25 for every episode that I do. If you're getting something out of this, if you are being entertained, if you are being encouraged, if you are being educated in some way, just warms your cockles, please consider supporting the work I'm doing on Patreon. It is patreon.com/John Huff Podcast. Don't want to do that? That's cool. The podcast will remain free and accessible where you enjoy fine podcasts. You can help me by sharing these episodes. You can help me by telling your friends. You can help me by following on the socials, Instagram, John Huff Podcast, Facebook, John Huff Podcast, TikTok, John Huff Podcast. I ask every week, please consider leaving me a rating and review on your preferred podcast platform. It absolutely helps the show get noticed. It takes 5 seconds to just drop in, leave me a 5-star, and it takes maybe 35 seconds to write a little review that says, hey, I like this program. This guy's worth listening to. Check it out. I would appreciate you doing that. I appreciate those who have supported in all of those ways and more so far. Patreon.com/John Huff Podcast. And thank you so kindly. I got a question from Kimiko, the great and powerful Kimiko, who said, what's your favorite band that you've ever shared the stage with? That's a compelling one, because I've talked about already how Hearts were direct support for Nazareth and for the Headstones and for Finger 11. And the Carly Band was direct support one time for Sloan. And out of all of those bands, I think Sloan is probably my favorite. And they were just like chill. They're just backstage, just sort of hanging out, talking to the mayor, who was there on his bicycle. And I dig Sloan. But, you know, my favorite bands that I've shared the stage with have tended to be other local indie bands in our scene, you know, who are our friends. And I think immediately of a fabulous rockabilly punk band, you might say a punkabilly band, called the Black Frame Spectacle. And everybody in L-Town loves the Black Frame Spectacle. It is a duo, Ace and Sully, and they're just so freaking great. It's like drop-tuned rockabilly punk songs. Really, really great couple of players. Great energy, great tunes. They got records out, so check out the Black Frame Spectacle. My favorite band, you know, going back from the indie scene is probably High School Sweetheart. And High School Sweetheart is not together anymore. But after the end of that band, I really, really enjoyed High School Sweetheart, and Hearts played with them. But I founded the band Nimue with the great Anne Monez, who was at the time ex of High School Sweetheart. So I got to know Anne via that band, and then we started a band together, made what I think is a really cool EP, and Nimue goes on without me, but I always loved High School Sweetheart. And of course, I have to mention Grace Fire, the great Grace Fire, who I've met and have played with a couple times in Germany. Freaking love Grace Fire. I had the great privilege and pleasure of singing backup vocals on one of the songs on their new record, which is Trapped in Society. That's the album. Go check out Grace Fire on your Spotify's, etc. Really great band and just really, really fun people. We had so much fun. I miss Grace Fire, you know? I have not been back to Europe to play music since 21. And I miss those people. I miss that band. We had a really good time together. So check out Grace Fire. You know, it's been interesting who you kind of run into along the way. You know, Hearts played Canadian Music Week some years ago at the Bovine. And on the bill with us was an up-and-coming duo called Crown Lands. And if you're paying attention to the music scene, Crown Lands has since blown way, way up, and they are freaking fabulous. And so we played with Crown Lands, got to know those guys a little bit. And on the same bill was this great glam band from LA called Hammered Satin. And they are like 70s glam, all right? Not 80s Sunset Strip glam, but like 70s glam. Freaking great band, great look, super entertaining. Really enjoyed Hammered Satin. And there's just been a lot of them. We've been lucky. I have been lucky to just play with a lot of people in a lot of places, hear some really great music. There was an artist that I played with in Calgary called Chanel, singer-songwriter, and it's just blown away. She was on the same bill Sarah and I were playing, and Chanel got up and played. She had I think a dude playing percussion. Maybe there was a fiddle or a guitar player. Freaking great. And there's just amazingly talented people out there, and it's cool to be able to be a little bit behind the scenes with some people at the next level or several levels beyond. I didn't get to hang out with Nazareth really. I talked to a couple of those people and kind of their team was cool. When we opened for Headstones, we did not get to see Hugh Dillon. Hugh Dillon was backstage, green room. We were not given access. You know what I mean? But I got to talk quite a bit to the drummer from Headstones. We had a great chat about the whole game. Really freaking cool. And, being in and around, kind of slowing backstage or hanging out just before Finger 11 went on that New Year's Eve. I was kind of hanging out with Steve Malella behind his kit, talking drums, and it's really interesting because you run into these people who are playing at levels higher than you, but at the same time, you have this connection. It's one of the observations I have about the music scene is that no matter where you are in it, up to a point, there is kind of a kinship and a camaraderie generally, It's like we get each other on a level, even if they're, headlining arenas and we're playing to nobody. It's like there is a weird fellowship, weird kinship in music. And that's been my experience. I know other people run into too big for their britches rock stars. That's a different thing. But generally speaking, the folks I have run into and encountered at all levels of this game have been just really great and have not been superior. We have shared a kind of kinship as being musicians playing in this game. And it's been really, really fun. So those are the bands, a lot of them I have run into. And some of my favorites, Kimiko, thank you so much for that question. Our old friend Shelly says to me, hey, does it take a toll on your body? Playing the drums, does it take a toll on your body? And my honest answer to that is, it probably shouldn't. It probably shouldn't in the way that it does for some people. When that Whiplash movie came out a few years back, people said to me, is that what it's like? Is that what it's like being a drummer? And I thought, you probably shouldn't have bleeding blisters on your hands. If your technique is right, you probably shouldn't have bleeding blisters on your hands. Now, maybe that dude was just practicing 12 hours a day and technique or no technique, it's just going to happen. I think that was just done for dramatic effect because I think if you're holding the sticks properly and not too tight and letting the stick do the work, my technique is not great, by the way, but I'm approaching this academically. You shouldn't have bleeding hands. So it can hurt you. And boy, if you've ever had a stick bounce up and hit you in the eye, that hurts. Or if you've sort of swung around and cracked your knuckle on the rim of a drum, that freaking hurts. I heard a story one time about a heavy metal drummer. I don't know if this is verified or not. Heavy metal drummer who, as part of his drum solo, would chuck the sticks and just play with his hands. Might have been a thrash guy. So he's wailing around the drums with just his hand, playing them as though they were djembes or bongos. And then he takes a wild swing for a cymbal, catches it just right, and the cymbal goes halfway through his freaking hand. Ouch! That can hurt. The drumming should not injure your body that much. Now, Neil Peart had all kinds of physical problems. He played a very physical style of music, and I think that's a big difference. All right, I don't play much seriously heavy rock and roll anymore. A lot of singer-songwriter stuff, it's a little bit more delicate. Don't have to hit as hard. And, but years and years of, and this is not me talking about Neil Peart, but if you have not great posture or not great ergonomics, then over time, yeah, it is going to hurt your body. And if you grip the sticks too freaking tightly, you're setting yourself up for carpal tunnel or elbow or wrist or shoulder problems, right? Like there's a lot of thought that needs to go into the execution of technique and the ergonomics. But, again, if you're on the road for 40 years, it's going to get you because the road is physically demanding. The road takes a lot out of you physically, especially if you're humping your own gear every night, setting up your own stages, tearing down at the end, which has been my experience. Ain't had a roadie yet, kids. That will take it out of you. You're not getting a lot of sleep. You're probably not eating all that well. You may not be exercising because your fatigue levels and time just don't allow for it. So being on the road for extended periods of time, I think is probably more physically damaging than actually playing the drums. Guitar players get into lots of problems. Guitar players get into problems with their hips, problems with their shoulders from having that guitar and their necks slung around their bodies. And, if you're a player who plays like a heavy guitar and strings it low and you're kind of bent over, you're hunched over at the shoulders, like guitar players get into a lot of problems, spine, shoulders, hips, from just having that instrument weighing their body down and probably not holding it in the right positions. I've talked to a lot of guitar players about this, not really being a guitar player myself, but I can see how that would work. And if you play it in such a way that you've got, your hips kind of tilted as a stance or a posture, or just to accommodate the shape of your guitar, over time, yeah, man, that's going to take it out of you. That's going to hurt your hips. It's going to hurt your shoulders, neck, back. And drummers can have the same thing. If you slouch, if you sit too low and you kind of compress your lower back, if you sit too high and have trouble with balance, like there's a really fine line. But technique cures a lot of that. And ergonomics cures a lot of that too. Having said that, I'm not a young man anymore. I ain't no spring chicken, but I ain't an old rooster yet either. So we'll see. I have the back spasms that is not related to drumming. In a lot of cases, drumming actually helps. If I can sit on the throne and if I can move properly, even with the spasms, sometimes the motion of the leg up and down, both legs up and down, actually can kind of release those spasms. It can actually be helpful. But it's like anything else. I think you need to keep yourself in reasonably good shape. I think you have to work on your technique so that you're not gripping the stick too tight and you are letting the stick do the work, doing the rebound, and that will save your wrists, that will save your fingers. And we'll see though. We'll see if I continue to play in another 15 years, what kind of shape I'm in. So that's a long way of saying, Shelley, it doesn't have to take a toll on your body. Like, again, if you're a thrash drummer or if you're a theatrical drummer doing a lot of big looping over the head kind of visual stuff, yeah, over time. And there have been lots of times after playing a Hearts gig when I have woken up the next morning and my neck is killing me because that was part of the show. So there'd be a lot of head banging, a lot of hair flinging back on the drums because we were a hard rock band and that was part of the show. Part of the visual was the drummer, seeming to go nuts back there, just like the rest of the band jumping around. High energy has to translate that way. And the funny thing about high energy is that you think you're going nuts and then you watch the replay or you watch video of it and you're like, wait a minute, I was hardly moving. It felt like I was going crazy. So people who look like they actually are going crazy must be really giving her. And that probably takes a toll. But my neck used to hurt. For sure, my neck used to hurt after Hiroshima Hearts gigs because that was the show and that was the game. So it can depend very much on the style of music you're playing, I guess. At the moment, I'm not playing stuff that demands that from me, and it does not demand a lot of hard hitting from me. And so I can measure my technique reasonably well and measure my posture and not put my body through a lot of that. So touring, riding in the bus or riding in the van, being cramped up, not exercising, not eating, not sleeping, that'll get you. Also, walking through dark German forests at night might also take a toll on your body too. All right, we're going to save the last question. Belongs to our old pal Jay. Jay actually sent me, as ever, some really kind of fun questions. One of the ones that, there's just some interesting memories here. He's like, Have you ever had equipment failure? Well, yeah. I've talked before about bass pedals falling apart or hi-hat stands falling apart. I've seen cymbals blow over in an outdoor gig. That's not fun. And, guitar players break freaking strings all the time or straps. Happens all the dang time. But we've had some curious ones too. I can remember Hearts playing an outdoor gig one time. I think it was a Halloween thing. And the stage we were playing on was run by a generator that conked. So halfway through a song, we're just giving her, and then the power's just off. I remember seeing Death Cab for Cutie play one time at whatever it is now, Pepsi Arena, Coca-Cola, whatever it is, on the grounds of the X. And a fire alarm went off halfway through their freaking set, and it just wouldn't shut off. It just kept going through the whole dang thing. And Ben Gibbert's like, will you shut the effing thing off? And it's like, that kind of weird stuff happens all the time. There's a funny video of the first show of the most recent Ghost tour where they're playing Kaiserion for the first time live. And it's the first show, the first song of the set. And there's a huge, massive white curtain that covers the stage. And then when the song kicks in, the curtain's supposed to fall, and then there's Ghost with their amazing stage, etc. Curtain wouldn't fall. They're playing away, the crowd's going, and they can't get the curtain to fall. This sort of thing happens all the time. One time, Hearts were playing, and we're cranking away, and then all of a sudden there's just smoke. Like, whoa, what's going on? A stage monitor, caught freaking fire, man. There's like flames shooting out. It's like there's no pyro in this venue, man. So that kind of weird stuff happens. I've seen a floor tom collapse on itself and then roll across the stage with the drummer chasing it. It was not me. So you get into some weird stuff, man. You do along the way get into some weird freaking stuff. And then Jay says, what was the best payment you ever received? And what was the worst payment you ever received? And I thought about that. Not going to get into the financials, but I would say the best payment I ever received, particularly that was not a check, was free passage across the great country of Canada on the Via train. Back in whatever year it was, 15, 16. I've talked about this before, but Carly and I were the Via Rail artist on board. And what that means is that we got on the train in Toronto, bound for Vancouver, and we got free passage for performing on the train. So we did 3 shows a day on board that train, which was a freaking wild ride, man. You ever been on a train, like a passenger train like that, with sleepers and stuff? Very, very narrow. And so you're walking down these little hallways carrying your box drum, just banging your elbows off both sides. It was a nightmare. Shelley, that will take a toll on your freaking body. And you walk past all these like cabins, and there's not enough room for people to pass each other. So you start down the hall, and somebody else starts down the hall from the other side. One of you, it's like this huge game of chicken. One of you's got to come back and wait for the other to go by, banging your freaking elbows. And then different sections of the car, it gets weird depending on the sort of, I don't even want to go into this. A train is like a little weird ecosystem. And we were on it. We were like 3 days to Edmonton, and we jumped off and did like for 2 weeks shows around Alberta, got back on the train, went to Vancouver, jumped off, did like 2 weeks of shows around BC, and then got back on the train, played our way straight back across 4 freaking days. 3 shows a day, man. And for that, we got free passage, we got free cabins, we got free meals. The food on the freaking train was dynamite, and it was an incredibly cool. I always wanted to go across the country on the train. It was like a dream of mine, and then music delivered for free, gratis, kids, Via Rail, artist on board. And that was probably the coolest payment I ever received for playing gigs, because that trip, had we paid for it, was, I don't know, 10 grand, something like that, like an outrageous price for what was a really freaking cool experience, man. Probably the best or coolest payment I ever received. That wasn't cold, hard cash. Worst payment? Exposure. Exposure is the worst payment I've ever received. I have yet, in all of my years of all of my shows, with all of my bands and all of my acts, seen the payment of exposure produce one damn thing. So exposure is the worst payment I received. That will wrap up our Q&A session and I guess end my reflections on 10 years in music. I want to thank you for listening this far. I hope you have enjoyed yourself. If you have other questions for me about my experience in music or about anything else, man, I love receiving the listener questions. They always make for compelling and wide-ranging episodes, and that's what we're all about here, being compelling and wide-ranging. I want to thank you for listening. Check me out on the socials. Please do consider the Patreon. Ratings and reviews are most welcome. I'm going to shutting up. Hope you're well. I'll be back next week with something. I don't know what. If you got ideas, send them my way, and I will consider them. Until then, I'll check you later. Yeah. Hey, the Grammys were last night. Anybody care? Anybody? Hello? Nah, me neither.